This Week in Startups is brought to you by WordPress. Get started today with 50% off any new plan purchase. Go to wordpress.com/twist to create your website and find the plan that's right for you. And The Black Tux, high-quality rental suits and tuxedos ordered online and delivered to your doorstep. To get $20 off your purchase, visit theblacktux.com/twist.
Hey everybody, welcome to This Week in Startups. I'm your host, Jason Calacanis, and we've got a very special episode and guest for you today. Patty McCord was a key member of Reed Hastings' epic run in building Netflix from a quirky blockbuster competitor. Its biggest innovation was, of course, mailing their patented red reusable envelope. And now they are Hollywood's dominant creator of entertainment. The firm recently announced over 110 million global subscribers, putting them on pace to create the largest paid subscription service in history. Yes, the history of humanity. It's clear that Netflix is going to hit 250 million people in the next couple of years, and I believe it could hit 1 billion in the next decade or so, and that's obviously a big deal. Patty co-created the famous Netflix culture deck, and she has some very unique views on creating a winning culture in her new book, Powerful: Building a Culture of Freedom and Responsibility. She details that and her journey at Netflix, and it's inspiring, tactical, and a quick, blunt read. I give it my highest recommendation. It's amazing. A must-read for all founders. However, reading what it's like to work at Netflix and Glassdoor and Quora shows a much more complex picture, with people detailing a culture driven by an intense fear of being fired, with one former employee doing a deep analysis of LinkedIn's data showing that Netflix had a magnitude more former employees than their contemporaries Google and Facebook. Current and former employees say that Netflix plays twice as much as their competitors, but maybe because they can't keep people. Netflix believes they are a sports team, not a family. Players are going to come and go. And as you know, there's little loyalty in sports teams. Today, I hope to get to the truth about Netflix sometimes polarizing and quixotic culture from the actual person who architected it. Welcome to the show,
Thank you.
Patty.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. The book is amazing. Congratulations. Maybe we could start with you giving us a little background of how you wound up at Netflix and what your role was there, and then we can get into these controversial and quixotic issues.
Well, I didn't roll off the turnip truck and end up at Netflix. I was in Silicon Valley for a long time. So I started out as a recruiter. I worked in big companies. You know, my first company was 100,000 employees, and I sort of went down from there. So I did Seagate. I did Sun Microsystems. I worked at Borland. And then when I left Borland to join Reed at a startup called Pure Software. It was a geek-to-geek software tools company, and we grew through merger and acquisition. So we were 100 people with 200, 400, 800, right? So every time we acquired a company, we doubled. What I did at the time was very traditional HR. I would take their employee handbook and our employee handbook and smush them together and try and make the fewest people mad. And then just sort of keep doing that over and over again. So we sold the company. It got acquired, as these things happen. Yeah. And Reed made some money. I made some money. I started consulting. He invested in a bunch of companies, other companies as an angel. One of the companies he invested in was Netflix, and he was chairman of the board. And then, so the company had like 30 or 40 people, had a rudimentary idea about what the product might be. It had due dates and late fees. It was mailing DVDs because he thought DVDs were the future. I thought it was a really dumb idea because DVD players cost $800 and we all had VHS players, right?
Yeah.
But he said, I really want you to come because I want to create the kind of company that if it were successful, we'd still want to work there. And I said, really? If you did that, how would you know? And he said, I'd want to walk in the door and solve these problems with these people every day. I'm like, damn, that's good, right? Wow. And he said, what about you? And I said, wouldn't it be great if we were a great place to be from? Like, you know, like someday if you looked on your resume and said you were at Netflix, that meant something.
Right.
Right. Because
it's like being from Apple or something. Or
yeah, because
Google in
I'm
the
a
early
recruiter,
days.
right? I mean, that's like, you know, oh, you were at during, wow, that must have been cool.
God, Steve Jobs era.
Right. And I didn't know at the time that concept would change the way I thought about everything. right?
Yeah.
So if it's a great introduction. Thank you.
Yeah.
So if I think about creating a place that is a valuable thing to have on your resume, a great place to be from, then I'm not going to obsess about keeping you.
Right. And that is, I think, why the book is making some waves right now. It seems to be a little polarizing, and it speaks to me and the investments I've made in 150 startup companies and the companies I've built. One of the things that you say over and over again, and you repeat, which is really the job of management, is to repeat the mission over and over again.
That's right.
You say, hire adults and to trust them and give them freedom and responsibility. When did you have this sort of realization that you have to hire people who are adult or who, I guess, act like adults? And where did that term come from? Because I noticed you said it at least a half dozen times in the book.
I think it was partly how I grew up in the Silicon Valley. So Netflix was a part of the last .com bubble, right?
Yeah.
The one that broke.
Yeah.
And at the time, we're going through yet another wave of engineers as gods. Everybody's got to be treated special. Everything has to be beautiful and wonderful. And meanwhile, we had a company that had it was very capital intensive. And so we had to buy DVDs and stamps and envelopes. And most of the people that worked in Netflix stuffed them in the envelopes. I mean, really, it was very physical stuff.
Yeah.
And so I would get these people who would come down and they'd interview and say, at my San Francisco startup, we have a granite conference table and we all have Aeron chairs.
Right.
And I would say, those Aeron chairs cost $800. Do you know how many customers we could make happy?
Right.
For an Aeron chair? I mean, I divided everything by $20.
Right.
Because that's what a DVD costs. And so it was partly our poverty that helped us focus, right? But we didn't, So one of the stories that most people don't know about Netflix was in 2000, we laid off a third of the company. So we were almost out of money. The subscription business doesn't actually start to multiply until you have a paying base that stays with you for a long time. So we were very early into that business. The bubble burst. Those were our customers. We were going to go public in 2000. We were going to be a portal. We were going to be Yahoo for movies.
Wow.
Yeah. And we did it. We pitched Sand Hill Road. We're drinking champagne. We're eating caviar. We're like $100 stocks, private jets. We're in, right?
Let's do it.
Bankers pulled the IPO.
Wow.
September 11th happens. Anthrax happens.
Yeah.
Did I mention everything goes through the mail?
Yeah. Wow.
Right?
I didn't think about that.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And also you mentioned, you glossed over one thing that people don't remember about the Netflix story, which was originally people paid late fees on DVDs.
That's right. Right. So we had changed that model a year or two before that to become subscription.
Flat rate. You just keep your 2 DVDs until you get the next one.
Crazy experiment, right? And it's like, oh God, I hope this works, right?
The company almost revolted over that, right?
Yeah, it was just hard to, it didn't make sense to people, but it was one of those it might be the only way. If it worked, it'd be really cool, right? It compounds over time once you understand how the subscription business model worked.
Right.
But not very many people did. I mean, the only examples we had of that at the time was health clubs.
AOL,
right?
clubs,
So but it so not a lot of for a consumer product,
right?
And against Blockbuster,
yeah,
they're 100 times bigger than we were.
Right.
So the story is in October of 2001, we laid off a third of the company. I said goodbye to anybody who wasn't technically working on shipping DVDs by mail. Almost everybody in middle management, because it wasn't efficient to have somebody's job to be telling somebody else what to do. So I only wanted people who were actually working on the product. One product, DVD by mail, that was it, nothing else, right? And honestly, I said goodbye to a lot of the privileged complainers and whiners and people entitled. Somebody said, well, you can't let this guy go, he's a brilliant engineer. I'm like, he plays his guitar and complains about his t-shirts a lot, and he's a good guy, but seriously, I cannot convince him we can't buy t-shirts anymore.
Right.
It's going to make him mad. I know it's going to make him mad, but that's the honest truth. So what happened was that Christmas, everybody stayed home. DVD players dropped to $99. You all had one under your Christmas tree. And the only marketing we did was a coupon inside the box that said, try Netflix for free. And our business took off.
Right.
Now, we don't have any money. I can't hire anybody.
Right.
We're doing twice as much work with a third as many people, and it was more fun.
When you got out that middle level of management.
Well, and when everybody there, it was so clear. Our purpose was so clear. It was a life or death situation. So I realized that the adults that got it, that knew how to do it, and knew what the time frame was and what, and it was the only way we could keep growing was if you told somebody else that it was great for free.
Right.
Because we had no money for marketing other than those coupons.
Right. And the DVD envelope, the patented DVD envelope, had that little piece you could rip off too and hand to somebody.
Yeah. So it
was like virality in the real world.
I don't want to be nostalgic about the time because it wasn't always fabulous. And it was a long time ago. And DVD by mail is a whole different thing than the company Netflix is today. But what's important about what we're talking about was I realized that the things that I was doing in traditional management practices that we were going to need when we went public in 2002, so said everybody, time to grow up.
Right.
I looked around and said, grow up? We're already pretty grown up.
Right.
Right? So if I start putting in all of those, I'm going to slow us down. And I'm going to have people think about something other than making our customer extraordinarily happy. And that was the secret sauce.
Yeah. And you mentioned in the book, the job of the manager is just to hire great people and who are passionate about that work and let them do their thing. There was something about your ability to hire people that was better than most companies in Silicon Valley. Describe that a little bit. It seems like you just had this core competency of hiring great people. Or was it firing people quickly? What was it that got so many good people there?
It's a whole system, right? So when you get to the story I just told you describes when we wrote the chapter in the culture deck about high performance, right? And we explicitly wanted to write down, this is what we mean by high performance. And what I meant was, and then I realized it's not just that you work hard or that you're smart. It's that you're the right person on the team for what we're doing at that time.
Right.
So for example, when we went public, I looked around and went, oh man, I don't have a lot of people that have worked for a public company before in a couple of critical roles. And it's not like they can't evolve into that someday, but we're public like right now.
Right. We need people now.
Right? So the hiring, firing thing, let me tell you about the whole thing.
Sure.
So creating a system, the operation to support a high performance culture took about 4 years. Right. And so I had to step back and think, I'm a recruiter. Why am I using headhunters? They don't know anything I don't know.
Right.
Right. Why don't
outside headhunters?
Outside headhunters. Why am I doing that? Why do I have two different sets of recruitment when they're the good ones? Why don't I just bring them in? Right. Why don't I know. And by the way, I'm a recruiter, so I know they're not that special. They're just networked well. And it's the beginning of social networking. So I'm thinking, wait, maybe we can just do this. Right. So you don't say goodbye to somebody that you might not be the best person for the next team you're trying to build unless you have a core competency that you're going to hire great ones. So I had to build a recruiting firm, right? Then I had to say, wow, if we hire people to build something and they build it and then it's done and it's fabulous, and now I actually don't need a new product to be built, I need people to maintain them, and these are the wrong people, then the last thing I need to do is put them on a performance improvement plan. When they didn't stop performing. They just finished the job. Right.
The company doesn't need them anymore.
They're great.
Yeah.
Right. And the difference, and this is the nuance that most people don't get about this, is when they get cranky about it.
Yeah.
Well, why didn't you find another place for me? Well, when we finished building the software systems to ship DVDs, and it did it extraordinarily well, we weren't going to create another DVD by mail product, right? Streaming wasn't physical distribution. It was a completely different product. It was a completely different business, right? And so it wasn't that they weren't great. They were amazing. They're just not the right So then I had to say, well, how do I think about separation? Right? And one of the things in the Netflix culture deck I don't like going back to is the adequate performance gets a generous severance package. Because usually what happens is the business changes and what your fabulous performance was now is adequate because it doesn't match the new stuff.
Right. It's not that you stopped performing, it's that you completed your mission.
You know, and back to what you said about a manager's job is to build great teams.
Right.
So you cannot point to HR when you hire somebody and they're incompetent. They have no fault in that scenario. You hired the wrong person.
Right. It's
right.
on you.
So yeah, especially if it's a skills thing, right? So you got to get better at interviewing to do that. So that became a competency that was what So now when I consult to startups, you know, I tell the CEOs, look, recruiting is your job forever. You should always be interviewing. You should always be looking for talent. Your employees should see you interviewing 3 times a week.
Yeah. And that is something that people think, oh, I got to deal with that early on in my career, but I can then, I just hire some people and pay them $30,000 every time they bring somebody in who's good. And it never works.
Nope.
You got to do the work yourself. All right. When we get back from this quick break, I want to talk about some of the quixotic things that people hear about and how you got to them. And 2 of them that come to mind is the no vacation policy. Also the no expense and travel rules, and treating people like adults when we get back with Patty McCord, author of the great new book, Powerful: Building a Culture of Freedom and Responsibility, on This Week in Startups. Yes, WordPress. I use it every day at thisweekinstartups.com and my personal blog, calacanis.com. And it is an amazing, amazing service. If your business needs an online home, it needs a WordPress.com website. It makes it so easy for your customers to find you and connect with you. And you don't need any experience setting up a website. WordPress will guide you through the process from start to finish. And they take care of all the technical stuff. It's super easy to get your website up and running, and the customer support team is world-class, and they are eager to help you with your site. Help is available 24 hours a day, Monday through Fridays, and on the weekends. And plans start at just $4 a month. All WordPress plans include a custom domain name for life. That's right. If you do a WordPress plan, you will get a domain name for life. Come see why 28% of all websites run on WordPress. So here is your call to action. Get started today with a 15% off any new plan purchase. Go to wordpress.com/twist, wordpress.com/twist, and create your own website and find the plan that's right for you. That's wordpress.com/twist. for 15% off. It's a great company. I've known Matt Mullenweg since he started it, and I've been using it for over a decade. They do a great job. There's a reason why the world runs on WordPress, and you'll find out at wordpress.com/twist. Get that 15% off. It's an amazing product. It's super slick. It's got tons of features, and it's super easy to use. Okay, thanks again to WordPress for supporting independent media, and let's get back to this amazing episode. Okay, welcome back to This Week in Startups. My guest this week, Patty McCord, who worked with Reed Hastings to make one of the great companies of our lifetime and in the history of business, Netflix. It's been, 6 years since you worked there.
Yeah.
But you spent how many years there?
14.
14 years. What an epic run you've had there. It's got to be mind-blowing to look at it now.
You know, I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur. Once I found the startup world, that was like my mojo. And the thing about Netflix was I got 3 startups without leaving home. Right? So my first 4 years at Netflix were, could we come up with a business model that might actually work before we ran out of money? And the story I just told you was, that was pretty close.
Yeah.
Second one was DVD by mail. The third one was creating the infrastructure to support streaming. And Netflix now is a global content producer. It's different. It's on another business model.
It must be mind-blowing, though, when you watch the Emmys Or the Oscars? Do you get nostalgic at all?
I get so verklempt, right?
Yeah.
I just and I watch the Emmys and the Oscars, and I see in the audience, people I remember hiring.
That's
great. It's just I'm incredibly proud.
Back to the treating people like adults.
Yep.
Two of the things that people have tried to copy about Netflix, and I think sometimes they get it wrong because they look at this in the context of giving perks, and this constant perk-based culture, material rewards, and let's face it, nonsense in Silicon Valley, foosball tables, kind bars, and anything that's not the core business and the customer. And two of these that you go into in the book that people always get wrong, I believe, are the no vacation policy, sometimes interpreted as unlimited vacation policy today, which is absurd. But talk about how you got to that point of, hey, we're not going to have a vacation policy. You're an adult. Do what you need to do.
It's a very specific story. We had gone public. We were audited by KPMG. Mm-hmm. The process I used before that was you accrued a day a month. You had 26 days a year, and you trued up when you left the company. So when you leave the company, I'm like, so what do I owe you? And you'd say, I guess 26 days. I'm like, great. How was Hawaii? Thinking, glad you're going.
Yeah.
But so they came down and said, we don't like this. All that's fallen to the bottom line. You're technically paying people 13 months a year. Fix it. Here's a sample policy. Sarbanes-Oxley guys came down and said pretty much the same thing. Here's typical policy. You can automate it because you're a cool company. And I was like, why do I have all these stupid bank holidays? When I don't celebrate Diwali right, it just didn't map my workplace and it wasn't flexible. So Reed came down. He's like, what are you upset about? I'm like, stupid policy. And he said, do you have to have paid time off? And the HR VP that I really was on my left shoulder said, of course you do. Everybody's got paid time off.
Right.
And then the person that's been hanging around with him for 10 years says, you mean legally?
Yeah.
So I go look it up and I find out for exempt employees, for salaried employees, there's no law in California that says you have to have paid time off.
Right.
So then I think, have I ever fired a salaried employee for being tardy or absent? No. In fact, if I think about it, a couple of people haven't worked out because they work all the time. They don't get much done and they're weird.
Right.
Right? People who work all the time are weird. Right? Everything becomes so dramatic because it's their whole life. And, sometimes you want them to just chill out and come back, right?
There's always that awkward, weird person who just is there on the weekends doing nothing but drinking coffee.
It really, seriously.
Awkward.
Oh, okay. So, and then I realized, okay, if I really, time is managed locally, right? Time is managed at the group level and every team has its own rhythm. Right? Year-end close happens every year in the first 2 weeks of January because the year has ended. Bad idea to take a month off in January if you're in finance. Right? So, and engineering teams, they work on pushes, they work on schedules. And I realized that everybody has their own rhythm in their own organization. And what's more important is to focus on deliverables and schedules and accomplishments and customer satisfaction. And I don't care how you do it.
Right.
Right? I didn't want to have my people have the job of policing them.
Right.
Right. Oh, here comes HR. Better watch out. Better lie.
Right. Which is what people were doing. I remember when I was coming up in the industry, it's like, okay, you have this many personal days, this many sick days, this many vacations. Okay, so I'm going to take my trip to Hawaii, then I'm going to pretend I'm sick for the day before and the day after, and then I'm going to take a personal day on the time back, and it's all like some bizarre lying, gaming of the system.
And honestly, at this point, I had become a partial geek myself, right? So I'm just looking at efficiency models saying, seriously, if that's where your brain power is going, that's a really bad ROI for us.
Right.
So how about, I remember one engineer I hired, he's like, I've worked at all the big companies in Silicon Valley and I hate HR people. And I make it my business to, mess with you and be a rebel and screw with your policies. Like, you're no fun. you don't give me anything to rebel against.
Right.
So that's how we did it. And And like everything in the deck, and you'll see this in my book, I started out as an experiment. I would stand up and go, look, if all the lawyers and everybody I talk to are right, this is a total disaster. You're all going to cheat. It's going to be terrible. We're going to have loss of productivity. But I don't think so. I mean, I trust you guys. So if that happens, then we'll just go back to the way everybody else does it. Best practices.
Oh, yes. And the other best practice that keeps coming up, we'll get to expenses in a second, but I think the more interesting one is the soul-crushing yearly 360 review. The moment of time when everybody gets to be told how inefficient or bad they are. And then yes, how terrible you are, yet you still work here and here's your raise. And now you tell me how terrible I am, and we all feel terrible for a month, and there's massive anxiety leading up to it. You did 360 reviews or yearly reviews at Sun and everywhere else you work, Seagate. And then at Netflix, you guys threw it away.
Over time.
So take us through that process and how people took it. Were people upset that they took away the review?
Yeah, sure. Some of them. Yeah. And we experimented with it year over year. We used to here's an example. We used to do 360s anonymously because there was a belief on the executive team that people wouldn't tell the truth if they had to reveal who they were. And my engineers would argue with me about that and felt that that was counterculture. If we were going to be straightforward and honest with each other and we were going to have candid conversations and radical honesty was important, then why would we do that? And I would say, couldn't agree with you more. I'm outvoted. Sometimes I'm not the CEO, right? So one year they signed their names inside the feedback.
Wow.
I love it. I love
culture. Great.
I love when they do that.
Anonymous feedback.
By love Kevin, right?
Yeah.
And you always knew it was him anyway because he was so articulate and good about the feedback.
Sure.
And I would always go back and go, wow, Kevin, that was so useful. Thanks for giving that to me.
Right.
But now he signs it. And Reed says to me, did you see them signing? I'm like, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And so that was a year that we experimented with that. And I know it's ongoing. We mess with it all the time.
Right.
But here's what I do know. The annual performance review tied to pay is absolutely hated by literally everyone. The HR people get no joy in this.
Yeah.
The IT people hate this. The managers hate it. The employees hate it. And so what I did with that was I used my product manager brain. What is this process for? Okay. What's the reason why we do this other than the fact that everybody else does it? So I'm going to pretend they don't live here.
It's a best practice.
So, okay, screw that. So is it a feedback mechanism? Let's say, and if I always tell people, like, let's say I was in a room with a bunch of product managers or innovators and said, I have this hypothesis that giving people feedback might result in better performance. What do you think?
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, let me whiteboard this idea I have.
Yeah.
Once a year in writing that doesn't actually say anything, we'll give you some sort of vague words that have something to do with what you did the entire year last year. And even though our business is changing significantly, we may or may not need those skills anymore, and you may need to do something differently, we're going to base next year's pay on that. Yeah,
that sounds like the worst product ever constructed to solve a problem.
Yeah, right. Everybody else on the table would be like, okay, there's one idea. Anybody else? Right? Jason got an idea. Can we get another idea out here? And then people say to me, well, one of the problems with feedback is it's so difficult to do, and you're really good at giving feedback. And I say, why I am? Because I practice. Tell me one thing you do in your life once a year that you're good at. Yeah. So that's where that, applying that innovators. I got jealous of them, Jason. Why are they the ones having all the fun?
Yeah.
Why couldn't I innovate? Why couldn't I step back and say, well, what might be and since I've left, I've learned a lot about giving feedback from professional coaches.
Yeah. What is the best practice, if you will, of giving consistent feedback? What does that look like for a CEO or a founding team member or just a manager? What's the right way to give feedback? What's the right cadence? Is there some,
I think whatever
advice you can give us?
cadence your one-on-ones are, And I think they are really important, face-to-face conversations with the people that you work with. It's okay to mandate. It's okay to have structure. It's okay to have discipline to ensure things get done efficiently and effectively. You can do that without a policy. Right? So one of the companies I work with, they mandate one-on-ones every 2 weeks. You meet with someone you work for. And that's, and when they skip level and talk to employees, say, when you met with Jason 2 weeks ago, what did he say? Oh, he's canceled them 4 weeks in a row. Right. And then I can go back and go, oh, problem. Right. Yeah. And then they say every third one-on-one is a performance conversation.
Right.
Right. And so when you're doing that every 6 weeks or so, I can say, hey, why haven't you finished this project we talked about like almost 2 months ago? I mean, I'm a little pissed off that you hadn't done that. And you say, well, Patty, you said you were going to talk to the manager in that other team and tell them I was working on it and sort of pave the way for me. And I say, oh, you're right. I didn't hear. Let me call him.
Yeah.
Let's go. I'm sorry. Right. So now you've been mad at me and I've been mad at you and we have this conversation and it's done.
Right.
We don't wait 11 months for me to say, remember in February?
Yeah.
When you didn't do that thing?
Yeah. Yeah. It's August. Right. Yeah. Let's go back in a time machine.
Yeah. And so I think you can have really honest conversations with people especially in the moment. The other thing about feedback that gets lost is the most effective feedback from human to human is positive. We think feedback means constructive criticism. I mean, we've, again, bastardized that
concept.
Concept instead of going, oh, by the way, before we get started on the rest of our one-on-one, you were amazing at that meeting.
Yeah.
Like, I'm telling you, everybody told me that was incredible. You were so articulate. You were so clear about what we're doing. Do that again. And you will do that by the end of the day.
All right. When we get back after this final quick break, I want to ask you about my favorite kind of confrontational device that seemed to really resonate with the right people, the adults at Netflix, which is the start, stop, and continue device. And we'll explain what that is when we get back on This Week in Startups. Yes. Do you have a wedding or event where you need to wear a beautiful suit or even a tuxedo? Well, theblacktux.com is your answer. That's theblacktux.com is your answer. They have high quality rental suits and tuxedos that you can order online and have them delivered to your doorstep. You can create a look or choose from tons of stylist selected outfits. Yes, the suits usually retail for $1,200, but at the Black Tux, they start at just $95. Expert customer care is available, and they will back you every step of the way. It's free home try-on. You can see the fit, feel the quality of the suit months before your event. And after ordering, your suit will arrive 14 days before your event. And after ordering, it's just super easy. You're going to get that suit. And if anything is less than perfect, the Black Tux will send you a free replacement right away. When the event is over, you just drop your rental back in the mail. Shipping is free both ways. Super easy. So here is your call to action. To get $20 off your purchase, visit theblacktux.com/twist, theblacktux.com/twist. That's theblacktux.com/twist, TUX on Tux for $20 off your purchase. Premium rental suits and tuxedos delivered seamlessly and easily. And this is just a phenomenal service. You think about the old days when you had to go to a store, you had to find one. Were they open? What were the hours? And were the suits any good? Were they ill-fitting? And it was super expensive and you got ripped off and it took a lot of time. This takes less time. It's super easy. It's super fast and it's super high quality, just like all these great online services now servicing customers directly. So go ahead and visit theblacktux.com/twist. One of our sales team members just used it for a wedding he was going to, and he got a tux, and he wouldn't shut up about it. He loved it. Okay, let's get back to this amazing program. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to This Week in Startups. My guest, Patty McCord, who worked at Netflix on that amazing culture deck. You can just type in Netflix culture deck and you'll find it on the interwebs. It's been viewed tens of millions of times. It's kind of like a Bible, but here today we're getting into the why and the how that these devices and those slides got put together. And that was a living document. It's not like it was written once and, came down like the commandments. This was something that was worked on for years, correct?
10 years. And we used it as an internal onboarding document. So it is not a Bible.
Not a Bible.
It's not a treatise. It's not a manifesto.
Right.
It was the way we worked and we wanted to describe it to people. And when Reed put it on the interwebs, didn't tell me, I was like, great. Now you're going to scare away all of our candidates.
Right.
And he's like, well, maybe it's the ones we don't want. But it changed the way we interviewed the day we released it.
Amazing. Let's get into why that is right after you tell us about what Start, Stop, Continue is. This is a device. This really resonated with me, and I immediately wrote it down and said, I'm going to do this at lunch today. Tell us what Start, Stop, and Continue is.
It was one of the experiments that we did around 360s. We wanted to have some structure. We're a company full of engineers, and the original 360 process included rating and ranking people on their six values and putting them in charts and looking back at last year and looking forward at next year and putting written goals and objectives and keeping them. And it's just too time consuming, right? So I don't know which of us found this. I mean, it may not have been me.
Right.
And I'm like, well, maybe this is just a little structure we have around it. So here's what I'd like you to start doing. Would be better off together if you could start being more honest with me instead of I find out from somebody else that you were mad at me or that you should have told me, you could tell me what you want. I'd like you to keep doing the amazing work that you do because you're a trusted colleague. I really like working with you. And I'd like you to stop telling, again, reiterating, stop telling somebody else stuff that you could just tell me. Right. Let's make that okay. Okay. And we did it. That was the structure that we put around the written 360 feedback. But at our executive team, we practiced it 1 year in front of each other.
Wow.
Right. And it was so powerful because you had to be really honest. And the other thing was, you'd give somebody feedback. Look, I think it's really difficult. My team has a really hard time working with you because I kind of never know where you're going to be coming from. And you say, well, you just get mad at me. I get it. I know. Okay. You've given me that feedback 5 years. And so I think it doesn't matter. And another colleague could go, actually, let me give you an example of how it does. Right. And it was brutal, but it was so great. And we would all go back to our teams and say, hey, I learned something in my feedback session yesterday at eStaff that I want to share with you guys because I think it resonated with me and I need your help. Right. I need your help in helping me to get better at that. And so then teams started doing it themselves. Right? They're like, well, if we could handle it at our executive staff and we got a bunch of adults at our staff, why don't we practice doing it there? And so that's another example of I didn't have to write a policy.
Right.
And I didn't have to make everybody do it consistently.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just like a nice little device and a habit. I love those little devices that
don't you?
They're easy to remember.
Yep.
They're lightweight. You can get back to work. It's not arduous. And okay, let's get into something that I think is really telling. The stated goal was to be a high performance work environment for adults. So this meant that when people came to you and they wanted to get experience or they came to you and said, hey, what about my career development? You told them what?
Well, first it's probably more of an ongoing conversation anyway. So I kind of know where you're drifting.
Yeah.
And first I would say, let's take a look at where the business is going and what's really important to us. Right.
Right.
And, I know, for example, that it's really important to you because you've told me many times and everybody else around you that if you're not a director by the time you're 40, you're going to feel like life as you know it is over. We don't really need a director in your role, right? You're great at what you do. We love it a lot. The company does not need that title and that level because that's not the scope of the job. And I understand that's frustrating to you, but you can be a director at lots of places. And if that title is the single most critical, important thing to you in your life right now, then go get it.
Yeah, go for it.
Go for it, right? And we should figure out a way to do that so that doesn't harm the team or the company. But let's just get real about it. I'm not saying it won't be someday.
Right.
I'm just saying it isn't now. And I need to be real with you because I need you to not feel cheated.
Right.
Right? And so, you know, it's one of the things, sometimes I go into these little startups and the title, wait. You got 5 levels of VPs and 1,000 employees.
Right.
You know, it's like
overkill.
It's
sure.
overkill. And then you fight for that. You know, you fight for your relative status.
As opposed to the customers, as opposed to the business, you know, core metrics and delighting the customer, people start getting concerned about the career development of individuals. And we've been trained to think, well, you go to a company, the company's responsible for your career development. And that's who's going to do it for you. But you say in the book, listen, career development, at least at Netflix, was on you. This is your responsibility,
career
not
development
ours.
is on you for everyone.
Right.
We just lie about it.
Right. It's a myth.
It's a myth.
Yeah.
It's always been that way.
Right.
It's always been your
You've
job.
got to make it happen, not us.
We're not going to. It's not, you know, it's in the book. It is not a company's job to make happy employees.
This is probably the most candid you are in the book.
You know,
most people believe that you're supposed to make your employees delighted and happy and walking on air. And if that takes kind bars and foos tables, and if you go to Google and they have the endless swimming pool and the volleyball, is that wrong? Is it wrong for them to try to make everybody happy and make that the focus?
If you're out of business, yes. Right. But we don't have that situation right now because we have a lot of money in the system and we have a lot of comparing notes in the system and everybody's used to all of this stuff. And now that we've giveth, it's hard to take it away. Right.
Free food is the standard.
Free food. And then, you know, what I worry about is that now that we've replicated Google and made work the place where you never leave because you don't have to, that we're going to create a whole generation of these weirdo people who never leave work, right?
Yeah, it's weird.
It's like, why are they all, you know, fraternizing with each other because they never leave and there's a bar?
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
and you serve dinner.
Yeah, you know, here's a story I just told somebody this morning. I said, you know, I remember when we had customer service inside our building and I walked up and one of the guys was watching something, let's say, extraordinarily inappropriate on his laptop.
Right.
And somebody else was standing behind him like, and I said, oh, okay, everybody heads up. See what they're doing here and what they're talking about is things that you do at a bar.
Right.
Right. But do you see any little wine glasses upside down?
Yeah.
Do you see the spigots? Like, that's because this is not a bar.
No little umbrellas.
This is work. Right. And now I walk in and there's 4 kinds of craft beer.
Right.
And I think, you know, how does Silicon Valley reverse Me Too when we've blurred the line between bars and work? So
yeah, no, it's I mean, at my events, I specifically tell people, like, just don't have hard liquor. Like, have the wine and beer for 1 hour max. And these nighttime events and these all-night parties, it can just lead to problematic situations.
Yeah, but the question you asked me was sort of, how do I feel about the happy employee? There's not always a direct correlation between a happy employee and good work. And so oftentimes when I talk to particularly HR people who tell me it's their job to make employees happy, what I used to say is, you know, that's not a job, but now I'm kinder. Now I say, you know your company really well. Pick 5 people that are extraordinarily well regarded, who do fabulous work and are really stars in the company. And I want you to ask them this question. Tell me about a time at work at this company that you did something that you felt made a difference. Just tell me that story. And every story will be something's hard. It's hard, right? It's always this when you go home and tell your pet, your spouse, your whoever spontaneously tell your cat, "Oh my God, we did it today."
Yeah, we got it done.
Today was such an awesome day at work.
Against all odds.
You don't say, comma, and there were macadamia nuts in the cookies.
Yeah.
OMG.
Right.
Right.
And that's the thing about the high performers that you're looking for, the adult high performers. They're going to be in sync with that. They're going to want challenges. And you talk about in the book that the challenge is what it's about, not the foosball table and the kind bars and the craft beers.
I think I think it's some of it is we'll grow up a little and we'll want more and we'll want more complicated stuff and we'll want to accomplish some. I've been doing this my whole life and everybody wants to be proud of what they do. Everybody wants to feel like they've accomplished something. And the accomplishment makes you pretty darn happy. So listen, don't get me wrong. I threw some killer parties to celebrate achievement. So,
not Friday.
Well, no, we were talking about the customer, like this morning when I'm reading the Netflix customer base, I'm like, oh God, I remember the chart that we did at the theater in Los Gatos that showed we had gotten to our 1,000,000th customer.
Amazing.
1 million.
2 commas. Here we go.
1 million customers. And Reed's like, God, isn't that just the best feeling? I'm like, I want to make a rug of it and roll on it.
Yeah.
Just
1 million customers.
I can't
crazy.
believe 1 million people would want to do this. And that's worth celebrating.
Yeah. Hey, let's talk about this consumer science meeting. I thought one of the interesting areas in the book you get into, which is not super controversial, but I think is very meaningful, is the distance between the information in the company, what's said on the quarterly reports, and the frontline people, whether it's customer support or just people working there. You say in the book, if you don't tell people what's going on in the business and candidly what the big challenge is, somebody else is going to tell them, or their mind's going to wander to some crazy dark place and it's going to be wrong. Talk a little bit about what's the right amount of information and how to share it, because this consumer science meeting I thought was, instead of computer science meeting, it was the consumer science meeting. Talk about the origination of that and the impact it had.
This is another myth and lie. We no longer, particularly in tech, tech's everywhere, right? Like I want to say interweb companies, but what company isn't? Right? Is there any company that doesn't have right? So in consumer-facing organizations in the modern world today, and probably for the last 20 years, our work has been very collaborative. And the idea of like you throw it over the wall to the silo of marketing is not actually how we work.
Not at all.
Right. So that startup situation actually extends to almost all corporations now, which is when you want to create a better experience for the customer, in the room is engineering and customer service and marketing. And right. So it's a collaborative, cross-functional thing that we do anyway. And so that was just an example of a point in time communication vehicle to make sure that people were informed about each other. And that questioning of what are your motives? Where are you coming from? What are you trying to do? I can be very, very, very critical about what you're doing if I'm doing it on behalf of the customer.
Right. So if I am going to war with you in this great debate about the queue, which we all remember the Netflix queue, which is, hey, here's what I'm going to watch.
Yes.
At some point, the data showed the queue made no difference. The queue existed because you were on a subscription plan and you needed to fill your queue to get your next discs.
Yes.
But that didn't exist anymore. You could stream whatever you wanted instantly.
Yeah,
so
it's part of the brand, right?
Yeah, so all of a sudden, the queue goes away. This was a big religious debate, but you had it based on data. And in one instance, you talk about Reed, who seems like a tremendous leader to me.
He's a pretty good guy.
Pretty good guy. And pretty down to earth, too, it seems, yeah? He had two people fight it out in a debate over a contentious issue.
Right. And
but
take
there
each
was
other's side.
bit of a spin, which was.
Yeah, they took each other's sides.
Yeah.
No,
they didn't take each other's side. They were told to take each other's side.
They were told to take each other's sides.
Yeah.
And what was really interesting about that one was it was a little bit of a tribal war, right? It was, I think it was marketing and content. And the two leaders were really articulate and really charismatic, and both of their arguments were really good. It was hard to. So when they took each other's side in the debate, of course they were super dramatic about it, and they took on each other's personas, and it was really entertaining. We tried to model debate a lot because it's hard to know how to be right. You know, in the end, it's a judgment call.
Right.
And so the thing that people can really learn how to do to further their careers and make them more valuable and have a greater, wonderful, work life is to learn how to ask questions using the scientific method. I have a hypothesis. Right. I think that if we did this, it would result, if we did X, it would result in Y for the consumer behavior. And I'd know why because I'd measure it at this time in this way. So when an employee would say to me, I don't understand what management was doing.
Right.
That seemed like a really stupid thing that they did.
Why did they get rid of the Q?
I would say ask two questions. The second one is more important. One, if you were in management, what would you do? Second one, if you were in management, what information would you want to make a good decision about that? So I met a startup CEO who said to me, I'm a fail fast kind of guy.
Right.
And I really like, we're making this stuff up. And so I reward failure. Every time I see somebody who fails, I give them a bottle of champagne. Like, well, that's stupid. Right. Because now you're just encouraging mistakes. So nobody's going to do the right thing. They're just going to reach for the wrong thing. And so he said, and what else I do? I always stand up and I admit when I made a mistake. Like, that's great. That's a wonderful thing to do as a leader. Part B is, I was wrong on this decision. Here's what I knew when I made the decision. Here's what I know now.
Right.
Here's what's happened between then and now to change the way, to inform me to make a different decision.
Yeah, a little forensic and self-awareness.
And back to it's called the code postmortem. I learned it from engineers, right? It's like, I'm from Texas. My mama says, honey, difference between a wise man and a fool is the wise man doesn't make the same mistake twice.
Exactly.
And now we put it into, management speak about, the continuous learning organization, which is a wonderful thing to do, but you have to celebrate doing it.
But you didn't hire. Let me know if I have this correct. If young people wanted to learn and start their career off at Netflix, you just simply didn't have the time for that, or you just chose that. You know what? We don't want to be the career development place. If you want a career development thing, there is a career development thing at Boston Consultant Group or Goldman Sachs. Like,
here's the difference.
Yeah.
We didn't create a structure to support that particular, and it may be different now, that particular methodology. What we did was say, and it wasn't that we didn't hire young people, we did, and I know that the company still does. We would say, we're going to surround you with people who are really good at this. And you're going to learn a lot by being on a team of really competent people. And I found that to be absolutely true. When everybody around you is as good as you or better, then you jump higher. I used to say to managers, if you expect mediocrity, that's precisely what you'll get.
Right.
But if you expect excellence, you'll be surprised what you get even from mediocre people.
Yeah. I had this experience because when I was training for the marathon, a friend of mine invited me to go running with his two friends, but they were much faster than me. And I was like, I don't know if I can keep up with you guys. And then I started running with them, and you know what? I started to keep up.
Yeah.
Maybe not for the last mile. I would come in 2 minutes behind them because they would sprint the last mile, but I was a better runner because of it.
Yeah. And the example I just gave you is when you don't know much, but people constantly say, help me with your thinking. Think harder about that. What would you do? Let me force you into thinking in a bigger, broader perspective than you might have. I personally think you learn more about what's important to you in the moment, where sometimes those structured learning situations, now, don't get me wrong, I love them. I mean, I love the MOOCs. I love the, online learn. I love all the ways that you can improve yourself. Sure. But I find that the best catalyst to make it happen is around other people who are really great too.
Yeah. Having that sort of apprenticeship, mentorship is, pretty compelling, right? If the people around you are just great at this, you're going to just look at them and copy them.
So what we weren't in my time particularly good at was particularly good at the process and the structure around it. Again, it was one of those things where I would have to weigh, is creating the curriculum and the system that puts everybody through it worth the effort if the business is still changing significantly?
Yeah. In the top of the show, I talked about how it's a little bit polarizing on the Glassdoor and the Quoras of the world. And I always know that when I see the 3.5 stars, it's just like Yelp. There's one group of people who it's not for, and there's one group of people who it's for. But there was a reoccurring theme of this fear of getting fired. Speak to that. Is that a fair judgment of that intense period at Netflix? You can't speak to it now, but there seems to have a reoccurring theme of people like, oh my God, people get fired around here. And in fact, somebody did a little study and they said like, oh, the ratio of past employees to current employees was like this incredible outlier for Netflix when compared to Google and Twitter. Why is that? I just told you one of the fundamental reasons. 3 different companies. Right. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So if you took whoever's the lowest, and you said that was the turnover for the DVD by mail business, that was the turnover for the early stage startup business, this was the turnover for the people that built the streaming technology. Right. And then this is the turnover for the people that are working in Hollywood. Oh, by the way, who are not engineers who work on streaming.
Right. It's a whole different cohort.
Whole different company needs a whole different group of employees. So A, we were just straight about it, right? And B, it was the right thing for the company and the customer at the time. And so, here's a story that I always loved. We had somebody who was talking at a big management offsite that we had. And he was talking about, this was the year we were going to climb mountains, no more incremental changes in the product. It was big, bold moves. And he had shown me these beautiful pictures in his presentation of, climbing K2.
Yeah.
And at the end of the conversation, the end of the meeting, we always had a thing where Reed and I whoever would come up front and anybody could ask any questions. And the person said, what about that culture of fear? I need you and Patty to address the culture of fear right now.
Sure.
And Reed said, you used a slide that said climb K2.
Right.
You have to have oxygen.
Yeah.
Right? And if you don't make it and you have to go back to base camp, nobody goes, you didn't do a good job.
Right.
Right? It's scary.
Right.
Okay.
These are big, bold efforts.
Big, bold things are scary. Yeah. And it's not for everybody.
And not everybody makes it.
Yeah. And so, and the other thing, if I could wave a magic wand and change, I would remove the word fired from our vocabulary. Weapons aren't involved. There is no blood. Nobody dies.
Nobody's assassinated.
And when you use that word, you make people feel ashamed.
What's the right word then? How do you contextualize
I figured out. So somebody that interviewed me said, what, severed? I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, that's pretty bad too.
But you move on. I got interviewed by a guy the other day, and he started off with you just use people, you just hire them and throw them out. What kind of heartless company is this?
Right.
And, he went off. It was Fox News guys taking me on. And I said, are you in the same job you had when you left college?
Yeah.
He said, He goes, well, no, I've moved upward and onward. I'm like everybody else.
I think one of the things you're hitting on is that on a generational basis, we had this concept that it was a family and that we were going to be with companies forever.
And we lied.
And it was not true.
Name one of them that has never laid anybody off.
For a long time, too.
Decades.
It's been decades since you get the gold watch after 30, 40 years. And so if you deploy that in reality, your idea that I'm not going to take this person who's an expert at the postal mail and say, let's figure out a way to deploy you in Hollywood to sign up producers and screenplay writers. Like, that makes no sense. You have to just say goodbye to that person. Good luck on your next adventure.
You not only do that,
Yeah.
you say, oh my God, how are we going to leverage what you did here?
Yeah.
Right? What are you going to do next with that? You now walk out of this great place to be from and say, what did you do? It's exactly what I did.
Right.
Right. I realized that nobody really knows how to do this or how to think about it. And so that's why I wrote this book, right?
Yeah.
I didn't do it because I really needed another job.
Right.
I did it because I feel passionate about it and I want to make a difference. And I can because of what I did.
Tell me how you work with startups. I know that that's the new passion, and I understand that.
When you were just talking about the gold watch companies, they're the ones that call me now.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah,
They're the ones.
How do we fix this?
How do we fix this? Banks, car dealerships, huge, like in the companies that use the word institutional learning. We can't get rid of that guy because he has institutional knowledge. How do you feel about those people with the institutional knowledge? And I say, it's probably really important in institutions.
Yeah.
But
this is a company.
You're chewing like a company, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's not the natural historic society.
They want me to come and fire everybody up to act like Silicon Valley. I'm like, how can they when they have to ask 11 people for permission to do anything?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just, they can't. You can't be that. So that's where I get the calls right now. It's hysterical.
Incredible.
The startups are, they throw the culture deck on the table and say, we want to do that. And I say, well, let's get started. It took us 10 years.
Right.
And oh, by the way, the culture deck is a description of what worked at Netflix, and it may not work for you. And so you want to start with, what are you building? Who's it for? Right? If you have a beauty product, your consumer might be different than if you have a technical piece of hardware.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
If you're racking servers.
A racking server or
different target audience.
Yeah, and a different product, right?
Yeah.
It's something you hold in your hand that you ship in a box versus you.
Yeah.
Right? A broadcast, right? It's a whole different world. And yet everybody should think about doing things differently.
Right.
My book tour has been amazing because I'm behind the scenes at TV networks now.
Right.
I've never been there before.
Right.
And it's a very different world. Right? And so the Netflix culture deck wouldn't work at all.
Right.
Right?
No.
And when I talk to my Netflix friends now that are in the Hollywood side of the business, they say that the most compelling part of the culture deck or the culture itself now is not necessarily internally. It's very much about extending that freedom and responsibility to the people who make the content.
Yeah, see, that is an unintended consequence that I never put together, and I don't think you did either, which is when you said to the people coming to work and building the servers and the DVDs, whatever, hey, listen, be an adult, you have freedom. Who knew that taking that and applying it to directors would make Orange is the New Black?
Who knew? I mean, who knew when I got rid of the time off policy or we didn't institute finance approving all expenses? I mean, who knew that wouldn't blow up?
Right.
I didn't. I didn't see those things coming. And when nothing happened, that's the other thing about innovation. You know this because the companies you work with, you do it and everybody says it can't be done, it won't work, and it doesn't blow up. Then you're like, what else can I mess with?
The list of reasons of why something is not going to work is always, the mind can always make a very long list. And the reasons of why the no expense policy, which we didn't get into, but, hey, listen, you decide what's reasonable expenses. Like, oh my God, people are going to start chartering jets to go to their sales meetings. Like they're going to look at that and say, it doesn't make sense to spend $50,000 on a private jet to make a $5,000 sale. I'm not going to do it.
That's right. But it might if it was a $500 million sale and you had to be there tomorrow afternoon.
Absolutely.
Right. And in New York, you had to be there at first thing in the morning.
Sure.
And there's not a Delta flight that leaves in time for you to get to JFK and get a cab to get to
Dave
the
Chappelle
right. Exactly.
To the big deal.
So that's a judgment call that adults make.
Yeah.
Right. It's a judgment call that adults make. And having somebody say, I'm sorry, you're only approved at your level for expenses up to $42,000.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so that's where
you're treating me like a child.
So leaving it, bring it back together. The way this stuff works is by this constant diet of context. What are we doing? Who are we serving? How does it work? What are the levers? What are the trade-offs, right? What's important to you? What's important to me? Can we go do those things and be aligned without having to micromanage each other, right? That creates trust.
It's very interesting because when you apply that to television, because I remember in the early days of the streaming service, you guys were running around Sundance, because I was covering Sundance as a journalist at the time, and you were buying all these art house movies. You were the new Weinstein Company, et cetera, without the bad stuff. And, it was like, oh, we're going to buy these things. But then you went into TV. TV's a totally different business. TV is for the masses. It's different than art house films. But you made that work as well without saying, oh, we're going to give you all these notes and make you make a pilot. It's like, go make the entire series. You created Weeds. You're a smart person. Go make Orange is the New Black. Bring us back 10 episodes.
Isn't that a great story? Yeah. I love that story that Ted told me.
Yeah.
And what I love about
tell it here briefly.
The story was Ted Sarandos, who's head of content, said Genji Cohan came in and she pitched the idea of Orange is the New Black. Literally just pitched it, and and it's quirky, right? It's unknown actors, very diverse cast. The
female prison drama
with the pitch that she made was it was the backstory of each of the people. It wasn't the story of the white woman going into prison. And she'd just come off of Weeds. And I think back to what you just said, there is something, and Ted and I are good friends. It's like, we do have this proclivity to really love great stories that are quirky, independent stuff. So it's like a full circle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. So if you think about the quirky independent movies that we bought back in the day at Sundance, it's kind of like making the quirky. Actually, Netflix premiered a whole slew of original content at Sundance this year.
Right.
So it went from like a purchaser to being
actually the originator of it.
Yeah, it's so cool.
And it comes from all those quirky decisions about the DVD business, et cetera. And
it also comes from a deep, long time knowledge of what people like to watch.
The studying of that data.
And the notion that a great story is a great story everywhere in the world. Right. That it was, back in the DVD by mail day, one of the reasons why we were able to take off was that we had quirky, weird stuff you couldn't get anywhere else.
Yes, it was like Miss Kim's DVD in New York. Like
whatever.
There was this quirky place you could get foreign films.
And there was an audience for it. I mean, I used to say, if you like big truck movies, and by God, we got them. And somebody does.
Yeah.
I mean,
and at the same time, Hollywood was saying, let's make something for everybody. It's really interesting. Like Netflix actually became this place where the artists who were being treated like children in Hollywood and were being told, dumb this down, make it for everybody. Can you take out these decisions that make the film a little bit dark and just make it a little bit happier? Like, let's change the ending. Let's make somebody not die at the end. Let's make them...
Because they have a different business model. I mean, it's...
broadcast.
It's a different business model, so you want to create a different product, which is the whole point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that they don't have... Broadcast has a very different audience, like we talked about before we started this conversation today, right? Your audience for the podcast is significantly different than broadcast, and so you have a different product for that. That makes sense,
No,
right?
people do not want a 3-minute discussion with you. They want 60 minutes for you to unpack this stuff.
Maybe. Some people do.
Oh, they do. Trust me. If you're a founder of a company and you've either read this book or you've looked at the slide deck or you're going to read it now, the book is powerful. Building a Culture of Freedom and Responsibility. What I love about the book is it's so efficient. You're a great writer, by the way. And it's one of the things I cannot take is when people use too many words to say things that could take less words. The efficiency of the book, it's so candid and blunt. It's a great listen on Audible. And there's a really nice thing we were talking about earlier when we were having coffee. At the end of each chapter, your editor or your coach summarizes the bullet points and the takeaways like you're in a college class and it's like the thing at the end of the workbook. And it's a different voice. And I love that because it gave me this chance to reflect on it. I found myself taking notes. listen, I've been doing this for 25 years and I learned a lot. So when you are listening to this, I want you to pause the show and I want you to go buy Powerful, Building a Culture of Freedom and Responsibility by Patty McCord. You may not agree with all of it. Listen, I think there's some polarizing views here, but it's candid. Just like Netflix was, and look what happened to Netflix. This is going to be $1 trillion company with 1 billion subscribers. You heard it here first. What a great hour. Thank you so much for being honest.
It's been super fun.
Okay. All right. We'll see you all next time on This Week in Startups. Bye-bye.